Carla will not come till sunset, and her face grew strangely white as she breathed the husky whisper, "Curfew must not ring tonight."
James Anstead, just turned 68 in July. I work in Covington, Kentucky. I live in Wilder, Kentucky, which is only about 12 minutes away. And I went to a very good academic high school, Covington Latin School, graduated from there in 1970. Then I attended Northern Kentucky University, got a bachelor's degree in secondary education and social studies in 1974. Got my master's degree from Northern Kentucky University in 1983 in education. And I have a lot of experiences in sports. I've refereed basketball for more than 30 years on the weekends. I've worked in basketball clinics for 42 years, and I've been coaching basketball since 1975 at various levels. So the thing I remember from my childhood, when I was 8 years old on a winter's day, I was getting ready to go to school. There were probably 6 inches of snow on the ground, and it didn't bother me to walk in the snow. In fact, I liked being out in the snow in my boots and my winter outfit. But as a backdrop to that, there was a German Shepherd dog in our neighborhood who always barked ferociously at people when they passed the house and looked like he would jump the fence one day. I avoided that dog as much as possible. Sometimes I didn't go a block out of my way so I didn't see that dog. So this morning, when I was getting ready to leave my backyard, walk in the alley for a minute, then get on the main street, I noticed a large German Shepherd dog coming behind me. I was scared. So I ran about 3 steps, fell flat on my face, and thought the worst was going to happen. But the dog came up and licked my face. And you can't believe how relieved I was. And I went to school. The teacher said, "Why were you late?" I just said, "Oh, I fell in the snow," which was true. I didn't go into any details. But then the craziest thing was, the next time I passed the house where a German Shepherd was kept, it still barked ferociously. So I could never figure out where that same dog was different if it got out of the yard or whether it was a different dog entirely. It was just like an unsolved childhood mystery. But later on when I read something, a quote, I remember this quote: "Always expect the worst, because when it doesn't happen, you'll be pleasantly surprised." And when that dog licked my face, it certainly was a pleasant surprise. All right, I have 2 jobs for the Covington schools right now. I'm here at the adult school, and when I'm not instructing students in the adult school, mainly to gain credits in geometry and algebra, I'm the homebound instructor for the Covington school system. I see students either at the Covington Public Library or at their houses 2 one-hour sessions a week. If they can't be in school with some health concern, maybe pregnancy, or every once in a while a discipline problem, they don't want them back in the classroom. So right now I have 4 people on my homebound list, and in the years past I've had as many as 15, which was really a challenge fitting all that in. And from October till February after school, I'm one of the assistant basketball coaches for the girls varsity basketball team, and we either have practice from 3:30 to 5:30 or 5:30 to 7:30. And first, they call district game, will be held February 20th. If we win that game, we'll move on. But basically, the basketball season, October 15th, you're allowed to have your first organized practice, and then the season ends for a lot of teams the 3rd week in February. Well, there were 7 children in our family, and our mother read to every one of us, mainly nursery rhymes, and then as we got a little bit older, maybe short stories and narrative poems. But I think my mother did a lot to instill in every one of our, every child in our family a love of reading. In fact, every one of the 7 at least got a bachelor's degree from college. And the quote from Helen Keller, yes, I think literature is very important, but I mean, sometimes it's hard to figure out what is the definition of literature. Now, I've read many novels. I like poetry, narrative poetry more than like descriptive poetry, but I don't read too many what you would call romance novels, but I've read a lot of adventure novels, and I consider great historical writing literature. For example, I've read many books about the Civil War, and the ones written by Bruce Caton and Shelby Foote I would consider examples of literature. And when I had free time years ago, I read all 3 volumes of Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and I would say that is great literature. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a novel or a poem to be literature the way I think about it. If someone writes well, a historical work can be a work of literature. I became interested in poetry because that's what my mother read to me when I was very young. I can remember, not the exact poem, but to remember as a 2-year-old how pleasant it was to hear her read the poems. She had the perfect cadence and she had the perfect voice to read poetry, and she was an English teacher, and so she knew just how to read something to get the point across. And if if I would have been exposed to short stories first, maybe that would have been something I became more interested in originally. But just her reading the poems is what got me interested in the poetry. When I was 10 years old, I received as a Christmas present a compilation of limericks edited by Bennett Cerf. There were 75 or 80 poems in there. There might have even been 50 different authors represented. Some were even listed anonymous. There's a compilation of limericks, but I just remember that the wordplay delighted me. And I like free verse poetry and blank verse to a certain extent, but just rhyming poetry is what's always interested me more. And just the clever wordplay and how they fit the rhymes in was what entered my mind when I was 10 years old. And maybe I didn't write any limericks for many years after that, but I enjoyed limerick from that point on. Well, it started as an accident, really, nothing planned. A few years back, I was a collaborative special education teacher at Holmes Middle School. I would help students who needed a little bit of extra assistance. So I was in an 8th grade English class, and the teacher assigned a limerick. Like 25 minutes left in the class, the teacher explained what a limerick was, gave an example, and asked the students to write a limerick. Now, I didn't just want to sit there doing nothing for 25 minutes, so I wrote a limerick myself, and then at the end of class, just to make conversation, I showed it to the teacher what had written, and she gave me some positive feedback, thought it was, clever, and that just got me thinking, well, maybe I can write some more. But the first one I really planned to write happened purely by accident. Okay, well, as I said, my inspiration was I didn't want to sit there doing nothing, but it took me a few minutes, and then I thought of something to write. A certain young man from France eagerly wished to attend a dance. However, his father said, "Son, after all that you've done, my answer to you is no chance." Robert Service wrote thousands of poems, actually, but 2 of his poems I particularly like, The Cremation of Sam McGee and Jean Desprez. Rudyard Kipling might be condemned as an imperialist by modern thinkers, but he wrote some great poems, and 2 of his I remember, The Ballad of East and West and The Truce of the Bear. There's a poem by Rose Hartwick Thorpe that probably not too many people have heard of, called Curfew Must Not Ring Tonight, where a woman saved her fiancé from death by holding on to the clapper of a bell so the bell would not make a sound. That's very descriptive, and I think it actually happened in English history. And some poems seem silly, like The Walrus and the Carpenter, but all these poems have a message behind them. Even something like nonsense, like The Walrus and the Carpenter, it tells you don't trust everybody. You can't believe everything you hear. That's a simple message of The Walrus and the Carpenter. In The Cremation of Sam McGee, you can't thaw out a corpse. The body's dead. But the moral of the poem is, if you make someone a promise and it's difficult to keep, you still have to keep it. Sam's friend said he would cremate the body, and he did, and the rest was a surprise, but it was a difficult thing for him to fulfill that promise. And I've read aloud The Raven in many classrooms, And I compare the Raven to the Cremation of Sam McGee in the fact that both poets use internal rhyme so well. Not only is it a great skill to tell a wonderful story and have the end lines rhyme, it's even better if you can have the middle word rhyme with the end word and still keep that same story going with no thoughts that it doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. And somebody like Edgar Allan Poe or Robert Service was just a master at that internal rhyme. The first limerick I wrote and got positive feedback from convinced me I should write more. After I had written maybe 40, I would show them to teaching colleagues from time to time, and I got positive feedback again. They enjoyed them. They thought they were humorous and clever, some of them. So, and after I got maybe up to 100, somebody said, oh, if you just write a few more, I think that's enough to try to get them published. All the adults you've shown them to seem to like them. Why don't you try to get a collection of your limericks published someday? I was inspired to do this because I got so much positive feedback from teaching colleagues and friends. They thought the poems were well written. They got a laugh most of the time from looking at the last line of the poem. Well, the title just came to me because they were all limerick poems, and I had done just a little bit of research and found out that a lot of books of limericks are compilations. You might have limericks by 40 or 50 different people in there, and some are even anonymous. And I just thought it'd be different to have an original collection of limericks. And I didn't know how many at first. I actually wrote more than 200, but by the time I'd written more than 200, I was able to select the 200 that I liked best and have a publishing company in Pittsburgh put them out in book form. From writing that first limerick sitting in a classroom until the end, it took more than 6 years. And there are times as a writer where you might think of 2 or 3 limericks in one day. And then there are other times where it might be 3 weeks before you get an inspiration. So, maybe on the average, I wrote 1 a week or maybe a little less than that pace. But I didn't really have any conscious idea of finishing within a certain time. I wanted to get so many because I didn't think it'd be a worthwhile book unless you had at least a few hundred to put in there. But sometimes inspiration comes in fits and starts. You might get an idea. In fact, sometimes I would be ready to go to sleep. Something would enter my mind. I would get out of the bedroom, go to the kitchen table, and write it down so I didn't forget it. And other times it might take me close to a month to think of a new one, but you just never know when, as a writer, you'll get the idea and get that creative impulse. Since the book was published originally before the pandemic struck, but the book is available. It's been available for a few years, and I always thought, when we were experiencing all these problems with the pandemic, economic problems, that it'd be a great outlet for readers to find something humorous in their daily life and not worry about the pandemic, not worry about all the country's economic problems. Read some limericks. Don't try to read 200 in one day. Just read 5 in one day and get a little humor, get a little relief from your problems. Sometimes I thought, and I've heard it said many times, laughter is the best medicine. And as a secondary thing, every limerick mentions either a place name or nationality in the first line. Now, some of these place names might be a little bit obscure. So I said to myself, well, maybe somebody will take out an atlas or just use the computer and find out where some of these places are just for their educational benefit. And in fact, this has never happened, but I thought to myself, well, wouldn't the 6th grade geography class in some school gain a double benefit. They could, appreciate the English language more, appreciate poetry more, plus they could find out more about different locations on the globe if they use these limericks. And I'm sure they would have heard of some places. New York City's mentioned, other fairly well-known places are mentioned, but there are some places where we'll just give you a little extra knowledge just to find out, oh, okay, now I know where the island of Mauritius is. Now I know where the city of Sofia is, and there's nothing wrong with a little extra knowledge. And another thing I always thought, well, if somebody could just get all the school systems interested in my book and get every public library interested in my book, there are about 110,000 public libraries, that would really be a benefit. It hasn't happened yet, but it's always a hope and a dream that I've had about getting that kind of interest in the book. To put it in simple terms, readership and recognition. I would like to get, many thousands of people reading the book, and recognition to the point where maybe a well-known publishing company will want to acquire the rights to the book. If you go to a grocery store now, you might pay the same price but find things are downsized. In a way, my next literary effort is downsized a little bit. It's another collection of limericks entitled For the Love of Limericks, with 120 poems included. The first book had 200 included, but I was advised maybe it'd be better just to have fewer poems but put fewer on one page so each page stands out more. And that was probably a good strategy. So the book is available through Amazon right now, and I can remember one of the ones that is included there. It's not a famous place, Lee, New Jersey, but it worked well in this limerick. A happy-go-lucky French student from Lee, considering foreign words, knew just 3. Reprimand for submitting a blank quiz, he might have quipped, "It is what it is," but casually remarked, "C'est la vie."